A tyrant's rise, propaganda as a weapon. Adolf Hitler understood the power of words. He knew how to manipulate them. He used propaganda to turn a nation towards darkness. Germany in the 1930s was a nation wounded. The sting of defeat in World War I lingered. Economic depression crippled the country. Hitler and his Nazi party saw an opportunity. They used propaganda to exploit these vulnerabilities. They promised a return to greatness. They preyed on fear and resentment. Propaganda became a cornerstone of Hitler's rise to power. It allowed him to demonize his opponents. He targeted Jews, communists, and anyone who opposed him. Through carefully crafted messages, the Nazis created a narrative of fear. They painted themselves as saviors. This narrative resonated with a desperate population. People were looking for answers. Hitler provided them, but they were lies wrapped in the guise of truth. Hitler's propaganda machine was relentless. It infiltrated every aspect of German life. From newspapers to radio broadcasts, his message was everywhere. The Nazis understood the importance of repetition. They repeated their lies over and over again until they became accepted as truth. This relentless campaign of misinformation had a devastating impact on Germany. It paved the way for the horrors that were to come. The propaganda machine, control and manipulation. Control was paramount in Hitler's propaganda machine. One of the first things the Nazis did was seize control of the media. Newspapers were censored or shut down. Radio stations were brought under state control. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's minister of propaganda, became the architect of this information control. He was a master manipulator. He understood the power of the media to shape public opinion. Goebbels used the media to spread the Nazi message far and wide. He created a cult of personality around Hitler. Hitler was portrayed as a messianic figure. He was the savior of Germany. This propaganda had a profound psychological impact on the German people. It created an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. The Nazis understood that propaganda was most effective when it appealed to emotions rather than logic. They used simple slogans and powerful images. They tapped into people's fears and prejudices. The Nazis also understood the importance of repetition. They repeated their messages over and over again through various channels. This constant barrage of propaganda had a numbing effect on the German people. It made it difficult for them to distinguish truth from fiction. Tools of persuasion, rallies, speeches, and the power of film. Hitler was a mesmerizing speaker. He knew how to work a crowd. Nazi rallies were carefully staged spectacles of sound and fury. These rallies were designed to evoke a sense of awe and power. They featured massive crowds, soaring flags, and the rousing music of marching bands. Hitler's speeches were often laced with hatred and vitriol. He used them to whip up the crowd into a frenzy. These rallies served a dual purpose. They were used to intimidate opponents and to create a sense of unity among supporters. People were swept up in the emotion of the moment. They were willing to believe anything that Hitler said. The Nazis also understood the power of film as a propaganda tool. They produced a number of propaganda films that glorified the Nazi regime and demonized its enemies. One of the most infamous of these films was Triumph of the Will, directed by Leni Riefenstahl. This film documented the 1934 Nazi Party rally in Nuremberg. It used innovative filmmaking techniques to create a powerful and disturbing portrait of Nazi Germany. Triumph of the Will was a masterpiece of propaganda. It effectively conveyed the message of Nazi power and unity to a mass audience. Section 4. A nation captivated, the impact of propaganda on German society. The impact of Nazi propaganda on German society was profound and devastating. It poisoned the minds of a generation. The constant barrage of propaganda created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion. People were afraid to speak out against the regime. They were encouraged to inform on their neighbors and even their own family members. This created a climate of self-censorship and conformity. The Nazis used propaganda to justify their persecution of Jews. Jews were blamed for all of Germany's problems. They were portrayed as enemies of the state. This relentless campaign of hatred and dehumanization paved the way for the Holocaust. The Nazis were able to carry out their genocidal plans in part because they had successfully used propaganda to dehumanize their victims. Propaganda also played a key role in mobilizing the German people for war. The Nazis used propaganda to glorify war and to demonize Germany's enemies. They convinced the German people that they were fighting a just war against aggressors. This made it easier for the Nazis to justify their aggression and to maintain public support for the war effort. Section 5. Echoes of the Past. Lessons from Hitler's propaganda machine. The chilling effectiveness of Hitler's propaganda machine serves as a stark reminder of the power of information control. The lessons learned from this dark chapter in human history are as relevant today as they were in the 1930s. In the digital age, we are bombarded with information from a multitude of sources. It is more important than ever to be critical consumers of information. We must be aware of the techniques that propagandists use to manipulate our thoughts and beliefs. We must be willing to question what we read and hear. We must be wary of those who seek to divide us with hate and fear. The echoes of the past remind us that silence is not an option in the face of injustice. We must speak out against hatred and intolerance wherever we see it. The legacy of Hitler's propaganda machine is a chilling reminder of the fragility of truth and the importance of vigilance in safeguarding our freedoms. By understanding the techniques of propaganda, we can better equip ourselves to resist its insidious influence. Only then can we hope to prevent the horrors of the past from repeating themselves.